Hello and welcome to our Wednesday Analytics Apprenticeship live stream. So we've got George Mountain joining us. So George, how are you doing?
Doing well, John David. Thanks for pulling me from the brink of a no-show. I was in the wrong link, but the joys of tech, right? So good to see everybody.
Yeah, we got it figured out though.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why I wanted to tap you was multiple fold. So number one, we're going to be reviewing, I had both of my apprentices that are on the stream. By the way, George, this is Liambe and Gavin. So they took Jordan Peterson's Understand Myself Big Five personality trait test. Sure. And what we've been talking through, so to kind of fill you in, they've run through 6 weeks now of Excel, Power BI, and Tableau case studies across 6 different data sources. Liam, this is actually news to you. So we've got the apprenticeship partner business lined up.
Oh, really? When is it?
So on Tuesday, me and Gavin are going to be going to, it's a packaging plant out in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So you're all the way up in Virginia. So, I mean, if you want to drive 4 hours and get here by Tuesday at 9, you're welcome to join.
You said what time is it?
It's at 9 a.m. on Tuesday.
Oh, geez. All right. Now I don't know.
So I figured, but we're going to be on facility there and he's going to show us around their facility, which I think is going to be really cool. So I guess, George, to fill you in, this apprenticeship program is we're taking people, running them through kind of like some analytics foundational training, then partnering them with a small business to actually build out some analytics infrastructure.
Sweet.
So have you heard of a program like this? I've heard of boot camps and I've heard of apprenticeships for like welders or electricians, but not really within the business space.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to become more common. I know a couple of staffing agencies that have boot camps that they kind of place the students with their clients. So I'm certainly excited to learn more, and it's on the ball. You're going to see more, I'm sure. As you all know, I bet.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, literally the last podcast guest I had on was like, it's a blue ocean right now, but brace yourself. There's going to be competition kind of flooding into this space.
You can handle it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess I've got the first mover advantage, kind of. We'll see. Yeah, because I don't know any other business application, like a specific within a business school within a college doing this right now.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So that is pretty interesting. Yeah. But also what I wanted to pull you on too is you do a lot of curriculum creation for different, is it colleges or is it like internal business training programs?
Yeah, it's kind of all of that. My specialty is really building those analytic skills among a team. So not data science people, but analysts who want to level up those skills. So yeah, I'm familiar with the space and have some basic understanding of the Big Five and the personality tests and all that. I'm pretty well fluent in how those are put together and interpret them and all that. So,
gotcha. Well, I'm actually going to run us through like a pretty quick slide deck of what are the Big Five, what is the application here, and then also walk through an example of kind of my own, how I can use it for my own test results.
Okay.
So let me maximize this. All right. So what are the Big Five? The Big Five are, I guess, within the psychological space, it's like clusters of kind of personality traits. And they break down into this acronym of OCEAN, which is openness to experience. This is openness and intellect, conscientiousness, which Jordan Peterson actually breaks it down into subcategories. So conscientiousness breaks down into industriousness and orderliness. Extroversion, which is, extrovert versus introvert. He breaks that into enthusiasm and assertiveness, agreeableness, which is compassion and politeness, and then neuroticism, which is withdrawal and volatility. So those are the Big Five kind of different, I guess, lanes you can think through, like what kind of a person am I? Am I someone who is open to new experience, or do I kind of like consistency within my job setting? So you can go ahead and take one of these types of tests. and then it'll give you insights on kind of where you can navigate well within the career space. It is pretty interesting because I think that there is some debate on like the efficacy of like, I mean, we're in the analytics space, like how accurate are these results? That may be like a fair point, that maybe they're not the most accurate things, but you can see this as a tool to help get clarity around how you can move forward, and then how can you also communicate who you are as a professional. So how are these useful? So here's kind of how I see it applying to my apprentices and also anybody who's listening to the live stream now. So understanding your personality can help you better navigate and find where you fit within the business analytics space. So Gavin actually came over last night and we're recording new podcast episodes. And Gavin, you're pretty low in extroversion, right?
Yes. Let me actually get it pulled up. Whatever. Yeah, so it's about the 37th percentile.
Okay. Which I think was, so you guys are getting like a little sneak peek of the podcast that's going to drop on Friday. But it is interesting in that, Gavin, what's your current role right now?
An account manager.
So you're basically in a sales role.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're an introvert in a sales role, which is case in point of, like we kind of like broke down within the podcast episode of like, all right, well, let's paint out your perfect day. What ratio of it would you be kind of working in solitude versus talking to people? And Gavin, what'd you say? You said it was about what, 50-50?
Yeah, about 50-50.
And what is it right now?
Probably right now it's probably a good 70-30, 80-20. In the office, kind of talking to people and things like that. So,
right. So, and it's interesting, and I've got to give you kudos in that you're in a job position that may not be a really good fit for you. But imagine if you woke up every day and it was like kind of ready-made for, all right, I've got X amount of social points that I can give out. I mean, and it's right at that like 50-50 mark.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit different. As I said, I do like it. One thing I noticed with COVID and things like that is I don't like, I guess, working alone and things like that I thought. I do like the general interaction and things like that, just maybe not as much all the time. But, I enjoy it.
Awesome. Oh, we've also got some viewer submissions here. So Sarah says, hi, everyone. I'm interested to hear y'all's take. Oh, y'all, nice Southerner, a fellow Southerner. Take on the interview questions. I just completed my first ever one-way video interview for a company. There were only 4 questions, and this was not one of them. Okay, so that is super awkward. Like I had to do that back, man, that was like 5 years ago, where they just say, record yourself answering these questions, and then we'll go look at it.
Yeah.
It is really awkward. And then Jennifer's saying, oh, okay. So Jennifer's an introvert and quality assurance in analytics. Awesome. Jennifer, welcome. So, okay. Let me get back to the slide deck. So the application we just kind of walked through of like kind of think through who you are as a professional, what kind of work do you want to do? And then how does this fit in with the different jobs that are out on the marketplace? So this is a specific question that I wanted to tackle because I think, George, this is a pretty common interview question, right?
For better or worse, yes.
Tell me more. What do you mean? Better or worse? You don't like it?
Well, it's almost too open-ended. I don't know how it just feels like a trick question. And we shouldn't be doing trick questions maybe for interviews, but if you can craft it well and you know how to answer it, then you can use it to your advantage. So very double-edged sword, I would say.
Okay. Actually, now I'm curious, what would be a better way to kind of get at, well, first of all, what are they trying to get at with this question? And then what might be a better way to frame that question up?
Yeah, that's a good one. So why is it so popular? I guess it's just such a status quo question, right? Anybody can really think think of it. It doesn't take much effort to come up with that question, but it probably is getting to that idea of, are you going to be a good fit? And, maybe there is an element to which this isn't as per se work related. So they're really trying to figure out the real you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than you jumping into why professionally you want the job, you think you have the qualifications. This is more so about, well, behaviorally, are you the right type of person? So yeah, I mean, maybe it's not that bad. It just feels a little lazy to me, but what are you gonna do? We want to keep it. I mean, we got people doing video interviews now, so that's just the way things are.
All right, well, let me get my mouse. So Sarah's saying she feels like all interview questions are trick questions.
Yeah, well, we've got that neuroticism as one of the big five. So maybe Sarah and I are both high scores on that one. I don't know.
Gotcha. All right. So I love that we can kind of use this as a conduit to talk about the next slide. So here's a snippet of my results. So my extroversion is I'm
Wow.
in the 99th percentile. So let me see how to. So your score puts you in the 99th percentile. If you were one of 100 people in a room, you would be more extroverted than 99 of them and less extroverted than 0. So I guess every single time extroversion came up, I was like, yep, that's me. That's me. And then also enthusiasm, which is a subset of extroversion, I scored the 98th. So to kind of get back to this question, tell me about yourself. So how I can incorporate this specific Big Five trait is that I can say, hey, I'm John David. I'm extremely extroverted, which is why I started a podcast. I literally have to talk to think things out. So I'm not the type of person who, if you ask them something, they need to get in their head and think about it before they kind of spit out an answer. I'm kind of like, I mean, what is the guy from The Office, Michael Scott? I'll start a sentence and I don't quite know where it's going to end. So that's very much my personality, and getting kind of more into this social media space and leveraging my interest in analytics and my extreme extroversion is just a really good fit for me in terms of kind of like how business fits into my lifestyle. Also, too, I don't mind going out and making connections with new people. I'm not really shy. So it's been no struggle at all for me to get guests just like you, George, to come on and talk.
Although I'm quite introverted, so I don't know how that works for me. But
well, that's interesting because you are pretty active on social media.
Yeah, and it would be great to see the distribution of data analysts. I have the impression anecdotally that they tend to be more introverted, but I could be wrong there. I think there is some degree to which we talk about sales and outreach and things like that and assume that that's going to be the extroverts game, but there perhaps is a way in which introverts, especially now with all of the digital media, to have some table stakes there. I will say, for example, that this is my third live stream today, so that is an introvert's nightmare, and I'm feeling the burn. So stuff like this, and knowing this is just kind of a fluke. I mean, I don't do this on a regular basis, but when you do end up doing entrepreneurship like John David and I, you end up with some pretty wonky schedules sometimes. But this isn't 3 a.m. in Australia or anything, so I can manage it.
Yeah. Well, okay, that is pretty interesting because, all right, we can kind of circle back to Gavin here in the sales space. Do you feel like it's a burden to go and have to like do you hit a wall where it's like, all right, I've talked to enough people, and at this point I'm just having to push through the conversations?
I try to keep my conversation very short and direct, so I try to get in and out pretty quick. I don't really do well in long form, especially when it's just like I just casual conversation and things like that. So again, it's just in and out for me for the most part.
Gotcha. So yeah, I do have one other question that we can get to, which is, and actually, George, I'm kind of curious your take on this question. You think there's another trick question here?
What's your biggest weakness?
I mean, is that even asked anymore? So I haven't sat in on an interview in quite a while, but I think that's kind of like one of those high level get to know you questions, right?
Yeah, I think it's still pretty common. I have the impression that some of these a little more vague question have been replaced by the whole behavioral, the situation, task, action, result thing, because these can be so theoretical, and it seems like interview questions are trying to get a little more behavioral. But I mean, this is, I guess, still one of those know thyself kinds of things. And I think inherently in this question is you saying how you've resolved it. Right. So, I mean, in any role, but especially for analysts, if you're just going to have a problem and not have a solution, then that's not great. Right. You should always be thinking about how you would resolve it. And I think that there's kind of an implicit, okay, what's your biggest weakness and what have you done about it? Right. So It's really a 2-part question posing as a one, which I guess does make it a trick question.
Yeah. All right. So this is one, like I've identified one of the specific results that I wouldn't say it's necessarily a weakness, but it's a liability. So I am in a room of 100 people, there would be one person more assertive than me. So what this opens me up to is talking over people and just taking up more space and maybe not hearing all of the ideas. So to get to that second part that's kind of implicit within the question, one thing that I'm actively trying to do is just do a better job of actively listening and checking in with people, because a lot of people I've noticed will have an opinion but don't feel the need to just blurt it out like I do, which it's interesting in that I'm starting to kind of get a little bit more self-reflective, because this assertiveness has gotten me to a pretty good place now. But if I want to kind of get to the next level, I can't just steamroll everybody. I've got to start listening to inputs from other people. So George, how do you think I answered that question?
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, John David is such an anomaly among data analysts, it seems like, because I would again assume that many data analysts, and again, this is just anecdotally, but many of them are probably less inclined to want to extemporaneously assert their opinions, right? They generally, I think, want things written and more asynchronous and things like that. And that doesn't necessarily mean, and I don't know what the Big Five would say about this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not opinionated and they don't have a way that they think is the way to do things, but they definitely tend to express it a little differently.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
I'm working on it in real time.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on just, spouting out stuff improvisationally. So yeah, we're trading roles now.
Yeah. I like it. So I think this is an interesting one in that if you come in entry level and you start telling the CEO, hey, I've been working on this analytics project for 6 months and you guys are doing it all wrong, you're going to look like a total idiot. But where I've kind of found I've navigated my career is that I am an advisor to C-suite executives. So they want my input. And I mean, it's interesting. Like I'm starting to get leads now from my LinkedIn courses. So companies are taking my courses and like their executive teams and then reaching out to me saying, hey, I see that you're established in the space. We want to implement analytics for our company. So yeah, it's interesting kind of seeing the high level, like macro view of analytics, because it started out with, the Facebooks, Amazons of the world doing all of this analytics work. And it's now starting to trickle down into medium and small size businesses. So that's kind of where I've carved out my sweet spot. So companies who are typically 250 million or less in revenue. And I come in kind of like almost like a fractional C-suite executive or a fractional CFO or something. Like they'll hire me on a very temporary basis to set up their initial infrastructure and then train someone on their team. Or have you even trained like CFOs on how to build out their own dashboards or build like the basis of it and then say, hey, if you have another question, here's how you can start to build on top of this.
Yeah, and that's a pretty interesting angle too, because if you're working with smaller organizations, the culture there is going to be different, right? And going back to this idea of some roles might not be as good for you as others, it's also a component of the size of the organization and how that plays off with, data analysts and where they end up. Like you said, there's this maturity aspect. And if you're going to be the data analyst at a smaller company, they're probably going to be less savvy about data. You may be that one person who's duct taping everything together. And that does take a very different personality than if you kind of have one specific task and there's already all this infrastructure and you're at a big place. So yeah, that whole size dynamic is a real wrench in the works as well. It's pretty interesting.
Well, it also applies to so the podcast that me and Gavin were on last night that hasn't posted yet. We were talking about, I don't have any SQL knowledge. I've gotten away with it because just like you said, duct taping everything together. Most of my clients don't have a SQL database. I'm just hooking into Salesforce and maybe their ERP system and then dumping files to a hard drive and then connecting that to Tableau. Or not a hard drive, just like their systems within their company. So I've completely bypassed SQL. And what came out on the podcast last night was that, Gavin, you want to go work for a bigger company, right?
Correct. That is something I'm definitely interested in. And as I know, like some of the stuff that we were talking about, like the different types of analyst roles, SQL, at least on a base level, is I don't want to say required, but recommended for sure.
Right. So I got to get on that. As kind of the business owner here. So, George, you have any advice on how to start getting into SQL? You've got a course on it, right?
Yeah, I do some workshops with it. I mean, my thing is always just position relationally what you know now to what you want to learn. So get into Excel, understand Power Query first. If you really understand Power Query, you kind of understand what SQL is going to be, right? Because you're already doing relational joins. You're already selecting columns and filtering rows and things like that. I would love there to be, and this is kind of on my wish list, but I'm working on a second book already right now, but I would love for there to be a SQL version of this, because this book, Advancing into Analytics, is getting into Python and R as an Excel user. So I'd love there to be a getting into SQL as an Excel user. And there are some resources out there, but there's no book on it, if you can believe it. So that is a goal of mine. But yeah, the company thing, you're right. I don't know. If John David, you have a strong opinion on if you're going to be a data analyst for the first time, is there a general rule of thumb for company size, or is it just totally individual results may vary based on, personality preference and all
that? State that question again, just in a slightly different way. I didn't quite catch that.
So, somebody wants to get a data analyst job, probably their first. Mm-hmm. And in terms of company size and, going to like a bigger or smaller place, is there any kind of one size fits all rule, or is it just totally up to the individual, right? Can we find any relationship between these variables, or is it just totally random?
So I did just sign my first $1 billion client, and it's literally the first client we've worked on that has a SQL database. So they have like a a third party who does all their SQL managing. So I just interface with them, which I'm realizing, like, if I wanted to grow my consultancy, I can just hire someone who in-house who knows SQL very well. And then all of a sudden I can take on different type of clientele. I will say this, my former student, Ben Knuff, who graduated from Greensboro College, got a job at a fairly large company. And we just, within the curriculum that I laid out, which is the only analytics education he got, we studied Excel, Power BI, and Tableau. So he did know a little bit of database modeling based off of our Power BI modules.
Right.
Because we're like connecting multiple data sets together.
Yeah.
And also too, my friend Molly got a entry-level data science job where she does a lot of SQL coding without any of that. So I think that if you can ace the interview, you can kind of get around some of the gaps in skill knowledge that you might have. Also too, you said Leombe's magic word, which is Python. So he's been obsessing over Python for the last like 6 weeks.
Yep.
Leombe, I know you got questions.
Well, not right now. I'm just listening because. Well, can you hear me?
Looks like we might be having some internet connectivity issues.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear my.
I can hear you. Yeah.
You can hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, I can hear
now.
you.
Did my internet go out?
We can still hear you.
I can still hear it. The time's still going. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just got like a flash. The whole screen kind of just went.
Well, I mean, I guess my question would be, I've heard from different people that you need to learn SQL, but then I also hear from different people that you need to learn Python. And I guess my question would be, when would you need to learn either one? Like for what type of data analytics?
Yeah. Do you have a target company or anything like that, or what would be your dream analytics job?
Well, my ultimate goal is to get into machine learning, but I don't know too much about it to even like go that route. But I think I would like to work for a bank.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Those roles too well. I think it may be worth just a basic content analysis and go through the job listings and start to count up the number of times you see SQL versus Python. And this doesn't have to be a script per se, right? It doesn't have to be a real rigorous test. Banks generally, their data has to be very structured, right? Because of regulations and everything else. So it's probably in a place where they're going to be using SQL. However, if you're getting more into the investing side of things, right? Maybe they have some kind of, investment products or whatever. Those people would get a lot of value out of Python, because it's kind of amazing how much of that stuff is still being done in Excel, right? People are making kind of big deal bond position trades and everything using Excel models. And it seems like they're trying to get away from that. There's going to be, so Python is going to have some kind of integration with Excel soon, probably. There are already ways to interface those two. So they're both valuable, but as far as like what to focus on first, SQL is just so common. You don't have to become an expert, right? If you're familiar, if you know how to do a left outer join and maybe some basic data analysis functions, then I think that would be sufficient. And then for banking, yeah, I think Python's probably a good idea for any kind of like banking or finance role. I think that would really kind of bring you to the next tier, and hopefully get the team excited. You could almost use it as a selling point or signaling mechanism, where if you say, hey, I can use Python, and you see that the light goes on with that team about like, oh, cool, we could do X, Y, and Z if we had a guy who knew Python, then I think that's a good sign that it would be a good place to be.
Okay.
So George, my advice for Leombe has typically been go get an entry-level business analyst role. and then see if they're, because you'll start working in the business, because like machine learning, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's like a year, like multiple year journey to get to that point, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
Yeah, for a lot of, yeah, it does take some time.
So I think getting your foot in the door in an entry level analyst role will help shore up your knowledge in terms of, you'll see how analytics works in the workplace. So how can you use data to drive business decisions versus trying to jump that whole step directly into machine learning?
Yeah, I was gonna start from the ground up anyways. Like wherever I work, I'm just gonna use that as a stepping stone to get to the next data analytics. Because first it's, I guess, business analytics. Then for me, it'll be what data scientist, then machine learning.
I'm not quite. You're kind of getting on my like on like my edge of knowledge. I know machine learning is in kind of the data science space. We have had Tom Ives on, who is like a well-known expert in machine learning on the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. He is so advanced in it, it's like hard for me to follow a lot of what he says. Like it's well, because I think he's also just used to talking to other people that are like within that space.
Yeah, well, you have to have a good level of knowledge on statistics, which a lot of people won't tell you, because I've been looking at a bunch of videos about how to be like how to be someone in the machine learning space, and a few people will tell you, oh, you just have to be a data scientist, learn Excel, learn Python, blah blah, but they don't tell you that you need to learn a lot of statistics. Like you need to be pretty good at that as well, which is what I'm also going to be doing. But that's after I get all like my job and stuff.
Gotcha. All right. So we've taken like a whole detour into hard skills.
Machine learning. Yeah.
Well, because I did want to just ask George about SQL and kind of how. So my intern Hunter is going to start. Liam, this is news to you as well. So Hunter is going to start joining us on our Saturday sessions.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think he's actually going to be leading the project with the client. So it's funny because like the more I'm getting into this, the more like I'm getting more into like the managerial space, and I kind of feel like I don't do anything all day long, which is weird. But I'm having to reframe like what is work, because like I am meeting with clients, I'm pitching deals, I'm structuring programs, but it's not like I'm not using as many brain cells as I was when I was figuring out like complex data quality issues, or like figuring out how to link the data sets together and find margin, which it's interesting. I enjoy this work. George, you're right though. I'm very atypical for an analytics professional. Like I'm sales oriented. Like I love sales, and I'm not very detail oriented. So like I need to divorce myself from like the like boots on the ground work as soon as possible, I think. Although I haven't had any like major flub-ups with my clients over the last 5 years. So
yeah, and that whole transition of data people getting into a more managerial role, I suppose that's true with most technical professionals, but it can be a big hurdle to cross. And then there's the added complexity of doing that in a more entrepreneurial role as well, right? Being a manager in a company versus being a manager on your own, and how that goes in. I mean, I think a lot of people would be very surprised, even for me, the amount of work I do that is directly related to data analytics is really not that much, right?
Yeah.
There's so many other things. For better or worse, I don't know, but
it's almost like acute imposter syndrome, where I'm like, my podcast is literally called How to Get an Analytics Job, and I no longer have an analytics job. I mean, Alex the analyst went through that same transition too, though. So Alexander Freiberg, who is Alex the analyst, he got promoted to a manager role. So I don't think he's doing much like day-to-day analytics work. He's managing teams who are doing it. So he was like, I'm ashamed now. Oh, also to follow up on the banking. So Jennifer says she works for Wells Fargo, and she says within her area they use Excel and Tableau. However, it's always changing. So Leon, if you want to get a job in the analytics space, I'm sure you could get like a Tableau specific job, and then kind of start learning some of. Well, George, do you think he would have to have some base level SQL, or do you think they would be willing to teach him that on the job.
Yeah, it sounds like from Jennifer's example that there would be a case to take what's already known and then bring it into a position. If you're going to end up getting into something more technical like data science or machine learning, or even data engineering or something like that, then SQL would become increasingly important. But in a way, it seems like there is some backlash toward needing to know all of these technical skills to really have any value as a data analyst. So whether it's obviously, it's kind of the old, well, if you have two people and they're the same and one knows SQL and one doesn't, well, yeah, obviously we know the answer there. But, in terms of a complete package and how much you know about the business, what your personality type is, to bring it back to our topic, et cetera, it gets a lot murkier. But you definitely want to have that kind of growth mindset regardless. And, whether it's SQL or maybe you want to learn more about, I don't know, behavioral psychology or marketing or whatever. I mean, you always want to have some learning path. So it doesn't matter what it is per se. It's just that you have one, I think is really important.
Okay. All right. So our buddy Dan, who was on our last live stream, is saying SQL is pretty easy. So Danny Ma actually puts out a bunch of content related to SQL.
Okay.
So that's a really good resource there. Also, I love this that we're having like people in industry interacting with the apprentices. So Wells Fargo has so many entry level jobs and is willing to train. So don't be discouraged by the qualifications. So
Okay.
I mean, this might be like a lead for you. So maybe we should.
Yeah, I might ask her
to like Wells Fargo, like specifically, because I think that on my own LinkedIn, I get leads about Tableau work for Wells Fargo. Like LinkedIn is trying to push me to go get a job, and I'm just not ready for that. Also, welcome back. So I think this is Mauricio. I think you were on the last live stream, so welcome back. But okay. What I wanted to talk about was, George, this might be a little bit of a spicy take, in that I think that this need for people to be extremely technical or do complex work is a manifestation of their own neuroticism.
So
like within the analytics space, there's almost like this ego of like, I do the crazy technical work, so therefore my job is justified. So therefore I have job security. And the thing is, some people can be crazy technical, but know very little bit about the business. So they spend 80 hours working on a project that moves the margin out by 0.00001%. So they might be very technical, but they're very effective with what they do. Like they can whip the coding language around, but in terms of efficiency, they're very bad.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of perfectionism. Also, being a technical field, it can be easy to want. There's some kind of inherent elitism there. There is, I would definitely say, there is a pretty classic case of neuroticism in that people sometimes will build processes and tools that they and only they can explain and perform, so they can keep their job. Right. And that's pretty classic. I've been in roles where people put reports together. They didn't necessarily want to even automate it because that way, they had to stick around and they didn't want to document it and things like that. So there's that. The whole technical side of things, I think there's something to be said for, we see that most of the most valuable organizations are pretty technically savvy. So there's obviously some value in it. Now, whether every organization has to be as digitally savvy as, Google or something, probably not. But, I don't want to dismiss the idea of, really taking pride in your tools and your craft. I know that some people are all about tools don't matter and you drive the business and this and that. And like, I totally get that. But on the other hand, are you going to go put your KPIs together using punch cards? I mean, obviously, the tools matter. if that weren't the case, then, you know, you'd be like down at the flour mill, you know, watching the mill go around. So yeah, no, they matter to some extent, but you don't want to like put the cart before the horse or whatever in terms of what really drives what.
Yeah, and also where my mind's going is that this is a little bit of a stretch, but it's kind of looking at the mean income in the United States versus the median. So like the average income is going to be way inflated because we have our 1%ers who are making billions upon billions of dollars. But the average person probably makes like what, $60,000 a year, 50,000, something like that.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, but like if you were to look at the average, it would probably be a few $100,000. So kind of where I'm going with this line of thinking is that people who are like highly technical, they almost feel gatekeepy of like, oh, you can't do this kind of work because you don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. And it feels like they're glorifying the top, like the advanced engineers that, George, you say like Facebook or Amazon or whatever, those are like the 1%ers of this space. So to like compare yourself to them, I mean, I've got a great example of that. Like my neighbor, I'm going to be hanging out and get a coffee with tomorrow morning. He was an engineer at Facebook, and he taught himself to code at age 12. Started consulting at age 16. I mean, he's like Dooby Howser of the analytics space. I mean, he went to college and then realized like, oh, I can code circles around all my professors. So he just dropped out and then moved to San Francisco and got hired by a few different startups and then moved to Facebook. So like comparing yourself to like that, and Liam, I feel like you're at risk of falling into this trap of like glorifying machine learning, but being like, okay, well, this business analyst role is not as cool. But it's like, I don't want to come off as discouraging though, because you if you work hard, I think you probably can get a machine learning job, but it might be 3 to 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to wait. I don't care.
Gotcha. Also, we got a really good question from the chat. So Dan is asking, would you say neurotic folks are more at risk of imposter syndrome? George, what are you thinking?
Yeah. That'd be interesting to, I'm sure that there's an official academic study on this. Just shotgunning it, I mean, it does seem like there's a correlation. Whether there's a mediating or moderating impact to get all psychometrics on us, I don't know. But, you know, imposter syndrome seems like it's a pretty straight symptom of neuroticism.
Yeah.
Right?
So my understanding of neuroticism is that you're just in your head and you're having maybe not intrusive thoughts, but you're having kind of meta thoughts of like, you're not thinking about, okay, there's a computer in front of me. You're thinking like, well, there's all these people out here. And what if they think something's like, what if I said something that offended them?
Right.
Like, yeah. So I think that kind of it's almost like cognitive noise or static that just kind of like buzzes in the background. So yeah. I think that most people who are high in neuroticism probably do have imposter syndrome. And what's funny is every time imposter syndrome pops up, I kind of like to divulge my, I guess, weird neuroses. Is that I'm more on like the delusions of grandeur side, where I'm like way more confident when I shouldn't be. What is that? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like you do two things in a space and you're like, oh, you're an expert, and then like you do 5, 6, 7, and then your confidence goes way down? It's almost like I live like right in step 2 and 3, where I'm just like, oh, life's awesome, and I don't have that negative emotion, or I'm not like worried about what's the next outcome. I'm just like, man, things are awesome, and it's like right here. To where the downside of that is it kind of sets me up for pretty public falls sometimes, where I'll just like put something out and then it's like a complete flop, and then I feel, I wouldn't say mortified, but I'm just like discouraged that, you know, I thought I had something, and it turns out that I didn't think it through.
Yeah, and that's an interesting tie into the volatility depending on what job you're going to be in, right? At a bigger company, things are tending to be more stable, right? smaller company, work at a startup, right? Things are very volatile. If you work for yourself, things are even more volatile. And having the cycle that you talked about is good to keep in mind. How your big five would relate to, again, going to that size of company, or getting into more of an entrepreneurial role. I get the sense, and it makes sense, that with it just is happening across the board, that more people are leaving their jobs, starting small businesses and things like that. It would only make sense that that's extended itself into data analytics and analysts. So with people getting more interested in that, knowing what you need or what works well in terms of your personality and just bracing yourself, it's important to know. And I think that the big five would probably be helpful with that kind of brace for impact as well.
Also, this is a little tangent about entrepreneurship and volatility. I think that early on it is volatile, but now I'm in a position where I have like a good 3 or 4 different pretty stable income streams. So I think where I'm at now is even more stable than someone who works full time, because
fair enough. Yeah,
you could potentially get laid off and then that's 100% of your income gone, to where like there would have to be multiple like cataclysmic failures for all my income streams to be wiped out. Which I know, George, you were talking about, like when we were chatting on LinkedIn, about maybe talking more about like entrepreneurship in the analytics space, which I think is a great topic.
Yeah, I've considered it. It seems like when I get kind of random messages from people, they're usually either about becoming a data analyst or becoming a data analytics business owner, because I kind of do both, right? So those two hats kind of manifest themselves in different questions. So stay tuned. We'll see.
Gotcha.
Like an entrepreneur, I'm testing small. You may see nothing. You may see more. It really just depends on what the data tells me, right?
Gotcha.
Circle that back too.
All right, so let's get back to the big five. So Gavin or Leon Bay, do you guys want to pull up your results and then we can kind of talk through? George, I think this would be interesting, having one of them flip up the results, and then we can kind of be like, let's look at these different dimensions and start to kind of think through like where might be your first. So both of these apprentices are looking to get their first job in the near future. So Gavin, you got yours?
Yeah, I got mine. Yeah, let me share the screen.
But also, Leon Bance, it sounds like Jennifer's open to connect if you want to reach out to her.
All right, sounds good. I see it now in their comments.
All right. So I guess the first one, agreeability. Yeah, there you go. Low. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Oddly enough.
Are you trying to make a joke right now?
Not at all. I was reading through this and I was like, I don't know if that's right. Yeah, so it just says people with high agreeableness are nice, compliant, nurturing, kind. I probably could be a little bit more empathetic and things like that. As far as that goes, I don't see myself pushing back much. I like to believe that I'm somewhat of an active listener and incorporating everybody's opinions into whatever project that we're doing. But who knows?
Well, the subtone that I'm getting is that you think disagreeableness is bad.
No, I think it can be depending on it, but I mean, I think you need a heavy balance of both. Especially when you kind of come into a new space like we would be, especially in this analytics space. I don't disagree much. I kind of lean on whoever is a little bit more of a veteran in the space. However, obviously a veteran doesn't mean you're knowledgeable. So, but I mean, I kind of lean on that for guidance. So I guess it just depends.
I feel like you're having a hard time accepting this.
A little bit. I mean, maybe I'm not as vocal about it, but I probably don't agree with most people. So fair enough. I'll take it.
Well, okay. So George, you've you've listened to quite a few of like Jordan Peterson's lectures, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of the stuff. Mm-hmm.
Well, because part of the reason why I wanted to pull you is that I just saw you posting like some of his quotes, and I was like, oh, it'd be fun to just talk to someone else who's like into the psychology of it. Because one of the lectures I saw where I think they did some type of scientific study that looked at disagreeableness in relationship to income over time. And disagreeableness is like the highest determining factor of where your salary is going to be in the next 5 to 10 to 30 years. Because think about it, like if you're disagreeable, you're not going to stick around if you feel underpaid.
Yeah, and as an analyst, there is that element of trust but verify, right? And you will be working with many people who don't understand your value, don't really understand what you do and how you can help them. So you do need, and I don't know how agreeable or disagreeableness fits into skepticism, right? But I think there is some element to which that's helpful as an analyst.
All right. So Gavin, what I'm telling you is this is a good thing. This means that you're going to make more money.
That's fair enough.
I feel like you don't like this, which I kind of wish I was more disagreeable because I let things slide too much, specifically with my students. I need to get tougher. I need to be more stern.
Yeah, if I'm honest with myself, this is probably more correct than I'd like to admit, but you know, I'm gonna continue to fight it.
All right, Dan also brought up a good point. If you're disagreeable, you're probably also not likely to be promoted. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree to that. I misinterpreted it. I thought he was saying if you're disagreeable, you're more likely to get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you are someone who just brown noses all the time, you're going to run the risk of just getting overlooked. To where like it's kind of like a meme or a trope of like, what is it, Office Space, where the guy's like, I want to go fishing this afternoon, and they're like, wow, he's got middle management written all over him. I think that happens a lot in corporations.
I think it can depend on the manager. So I think some managers kind of reward that, and then some obviously don't like that type of pushback, especially when it comes to people who are, a lot newer in the space or something like that. So I honestly think it just depends on who you're talking to.
Gotcha. All right, George, you got any other thoughts on our disagreeable friend here?
No, yeah, take it for what it's worth and know that it's not inherently bad, especially as a data analytics person.
Cool.
Well, Gavin, you're not like nitpicky. The people who really bother me the most they're very extroverted and they're very disagreeable. So not only do they not like what I have to do or I'm doing or what I'm saying, they're going to let me know. I think that you with your introversion being low, like you're not unsufferable to be around.
Right. I mean, everybody, it is what it is. That's pretty much how I live my life,
Yeah, I don't know how scientific the term is, but there's the difference between being disagreeable and being contrary, right? Where you're really just disagreeing because you like to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's different than disagreeing because you honestly have a difference of opinion and you're not afraid to express it. So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the edgelord.
For sure. All right. So this is probably a little bit more accurate.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you need to get in a job where you fire people.
No, I don't really like that level of confrontation if I can stand it. But
wow.
Yeah. So but this makes sense. So I mean it speaks for itself. Nothing needs to be said here. Leon Bay, how did you fare as far as the compassion went?
The compassion? Let me look. My compassion was on the 13th percentile.
Oh man!
So, all right, so don't feel as bad here.
Yeah, and on the agreeableness, I was in the 2nd percentile.
Wow,
really?
We got some hard asses here,
man. All right, for agreeableness, I'm 54th percentile. Compassionate, I'm moderately high. I'm 66%. I guess I'm the biggest softy here. I didn't realize. Okay, politeness.
Let's
That's
see.
the next one. Moderately low or moderately high.
Moderately high.
Interesting. So what this is telling me is that you're going to disagree with people, but you're not going to let them know.
Yeah, probably not. Like, I mean, especially if it has nothing to do with me. To be honest, I'll just let you rock out. Yeah, so I mean, I like to. I kind of, as far as the politeness and everything goes, I kind of live, and especially when it comes to a work environment, like if you've ever been to like a restaurant or something like that, especially fast food restaurant, and people kind of come at you with attitude, and I'm like, you work here, you chose to work here, you don't have to work here. Like, there's no need for all the extra animosity. I kind of try to operate that and try to not transfer that type of energy, especially in a work environment. So,
Yeah,
try to be as polite as possible.
Yeah. So what this is telling me is that you're kind of a team player.
Yeah, for sure. Try to be all inclusive.
All right, so let's keep going.
All
right, so you're like right on the average. It's not really telling us too much.
Right. Nothing crazy. All right, let's scroll down.
All right, so Jennifer's asking, is it disagreeing or just raising your hand to an issue? Yeah, I think that George is getting back to like the see, I'm a contrarian. I like to just kind of yeah, like I can't help it. Yeah, so disagreeableness I think is different than I will just mess with people sometimes. I mean, it's in a playful way. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And yeah, so this one right here. So I mean, it says successful in school and administrative positions, like their leisure time. I think that's probably me for sure. Like I enjoy work, but when it comes to work and stuff like that, I just don't have to hate it. I think one thing about the analytics space, the aspects of it, especially when you get like different types of data sets and things like that, are actually something that I'm working on right now that I think I want to kind of share, but it's not completed yet. But like you can transfer those types of skills in all aspects. So it doesn't have to just be with work or anything like that, like, outside investments, entrepreneurial type businesses. But I also, as it says, I enjoy my leisure time. I enjoy my naps, on Saturday, and going and hanging out. So,
Leon, I bet you scored like 90 plus in industriousness, didn't you? Industriousness?
No.
You're putting like 2 or 3 hours a day of work in on this, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, see, so I was trying to answer this assessment based on like who I have been in through the years, not who I've been through this class. Because I've been working hard on this class, but who I've been in this class hasn't been who I was previously. So I tried to answer it honestly, and I got a different result.
Well, no, because I would say you're extremely industrious, and I'm also trying to crack the nut of like why. Yeah, what happened to why are you so focused on this all of a sudden?
Because I'm one of those people. If I've always been one of these people, if I'm not interested in something, I just won't do it or care about it or try or whatever. But if I'm passionate about something and I realize I'm passionate about data analytics, just based on my analytical thinking, I've just been right about a lot of things, and I've used, I guess, pseudo analytics in a way to determine like who's gonna be the top artist for the week or the month, or what stock do I think is gonna go big in 3 months or something like that. I've used my own, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, but pseudo analytics, intuition. Yeah, intuition's a good word. Yeah, intuition to determine a lot of things. And then I realized there's a whole role for that called data analytics. I looked into it and I was like, oh, this fits me perfectly. So I finally found something that I could, be passionate about, because other than that, I didn't really have any other passions.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, also too, I've been thinking through this kind of like at a macro level. I think this program is geared towards people who are in their quarter life crisis.
I'm not in a quarter life crisis, I promise.
You're in your quarter life. You're flat out crisis. You're in DEFCON 4 right now. Panic mode. No, but what I mean by like quarter life crisis is that you went through what 16 years of education.
Yes.
They trained you that the world was going to be rainbows and butterflies, and we're going to sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya. And it's just like very stark contrast from like the actual getting out into the work world. Yes. There seems to be this kind of like decay in the education system and widening void between being job ready and kind of what's taught in most programs.
Well, yeah. I think I've talked to you about this before, because like in school, I got a criminal justice degree. You think, and they tell you that, oh, once you get a criminal justice degree, oh, he's feeling the crisis. Yeah, they tell you in school, oh, okay, once you get to this degree, you're going to get this big job. And they don't really tell you what job you're going to get. It's very vague, but they tell you that you're going to get some big job. And then you don't realize until you leave when you leave the school that, hey, they didn't teach me any real skills. They just taught me a bunch of stuff I could look up on Wikipedia. And,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. George is laughing.
Yeah, I mean, there's sadly more truth in that than I wish there were.
Yeah. And so now you're like, okay, well, what can I tell these jobs that I can actually do other than I can tell you what the criminal justice system is? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm looking for like something where a job where I can apply skills. Like I can say I know how to use Tableau. That's something I can apply somewhere instead of giving some vague answer. I read a book about the prison system.
Yeah, and I've also designed the curriculum, and George, you might find this kind of interesting. It's almost like a condensed MBA program where you have marketing data or marketing case studies, sales case studies, supply chain, financial data, competitive intelligence. So you get to work across different facets of the business. And it's kind of interesting, like Gavin, we were talking last night, that you thought you wanted to do financial analysis, but I threw that ERP, enterprise resource planning data set at you, and you're like, wow, this is a really cool data set. And then we actually got to talking about our supply, speaking of crisis, our supply chains in crisis. So they're paying supply chain analysts more than they are financial analysts right now. Like
really?
I literally, one of my students at Greensboro College was looking at analytics jobs in Atlanta, and we were looking at the average business analyst role, I think was like 62,000. The average supply chain analyst role was like 74. So there was quite a bit of a difference in terms of pay scale. And that's like a $15,000 raise, like just switching the title around a little bit.
And I've seen that on lists. I mean, because of obvious reasons, but yeah, I've seen that same thing on lists. Like typically what I've seen is like you have your financial analysts, whether that's in like the banking or specific like private equity investment, and then it kind of goes down from there. But yeah, because of right now, supply chain is at the top and everything else is underneath.
Gotcha. George, do you have any insights into that? Like first of all, why do you think there's just a pay gap? Are business analysts doing something different than supply chain analysts? Because in my mind, it's like you have a business analyst as the title, and then there's like marketing analyst, supply chain analyst, sales analyst. Is that a misconception of kind of how that works?
Yeah, I guess traditionally business analyst was kind of like what product managers are doing now, where they're doing more the business side of tech development, right? And gathering requirements and communicating with stakeholders and all that. And it's still around, but now that things have become so digital, I mean, I've had a job that was called business analyst, and that's not what I was doing. It is interesting, kind of the clustering and the classification of all of these roles. I haven't kept up on which titles are netting more than others, but it makes sense that supply chain would be up And you're right. You mentioned financial analyst. Even within that, there's corporate finance, there's investment banking, right? There's all sorts of things, and those all have very different expectations and salaries and all that. So I don't have a great answer on how the family tree comes together, but it's good that you're able to spot some of those patterns.
Well, the thing is, it feels like it's a shifting like matrix, because it depends on, all right, well, supply chain, are you working with a local packaging plant? Or are you working with Home Depot, who has one of the most sophisticated supply chain like within the United States? Like that's, or well, obviously Amazon has probably the most sophisticated. So I bet you they pay quite a bit more than like a local mom and pops.
Yeah, and that gets to what we mentioned earlier in terms of the data infrastructure and what you would be expected to perform with and things like that. Yeah, I don't know a lot about the supply chain area, but you're right that there's a lot happening in that space right now.
Right. So that's actually what I wanted to get on you guys about. So we're going to be meeting at Saturday at 11 a.m. I want you to find 3 of your ideal job postings. So pick a title and then find specifically that. And then we'll go through, Hunter will be on the call, and we can look through like, all right, here's the skills roadmap. Because on Saturday, we may be pivoting the program to be more SQL focused through the rest of it. Yeah. Well, because I mean, Hunter is like, I want to learn this, so he can kind of just guide. You guys can all kind of learn this together, and then I'll go through and document it, and I'll probably just pull him in the studio and be like, all right, let's put this into some like more polished content for the next cohort. But all right, Gavin, I'm pulling your results back up. We keep getting down all these like little tangents, which you guys like that, right? Like you like the little divergence.
Yeah, I don't mind. It's I'm getting a lot of info from it, because now that you brought up supply chain, I'm actually I like the ERP data too. Now that I remember it, and I forgot that we did that, and I kind of do want to look into those kind of jobs as well.
Yeah, I mean that was the most complex data set that I've thrown at you guys so far.
Yeah, it was, but it was enjoyable.
Nice. All right, so Gavin, we're looking at orderliness. Are the rest of these kind of like down because if it's like right around the 50th percentile, I don't know if there's much insight we could get out of that.
Yeah, most of these are extroversion.
Well, the moderately low for extroversion is interesting to me, specifically because you're in a sales role and you're having to interface with people regularly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, yeah, I can turn it on and turn it off depending on what I'm doing, and that's probably the easiest way to put it. Like, I'm not very overly enthusiastic outside of work. I always, especially in the sales role, you believe in transference of energy. So if I'm pitching something, nobody can be more excited about what I'm trying to sell than me. So, but yeah, outside of work, again, I can pick my spots and be in moments, but I'm very chill, very relaxed most of the time. So I don't really get up too high, too low. I'm kind of right there in the middle.
Gotcha. So you're pretty low in neuroticism then?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm kind of a little weird about certain things, but yeah, for the most part, pretty low.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's keep going.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Enthusiasm is low.
Yeah, that makes sense.
See, this is what's so interesting to me is that you guys are like working your asses off in this program. And like, I see enthusiasm is low. It's like, what?
Well, like Leone said, like I'm very like things that interest me excite me. So those are things that I'm very interested in and stuff like that. But outside of that, like I'm just, it's a lot of blah. And I think especially now in the day we live or the times we live in, it's kind of jaded as far as like the stuff that we see and stuff like that on a day to day. So it's hard to get that level of excitement all the time. It's kind of running on that high and stuff like that. Like I naturally remember the types of, highs and things like that you could get like at a young age, like the simplest things that, kind of brighten you up a little bit. But nowadays it's not getting it done. So
I was gonna say I'm 98th percentile in enthusiasm.
I can believe it. I can believe it.
I get all
I'm
excited.
79th. I'm 79th percentile.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so yeah, I don't know. So enthusiasm is what, a subset of extroversion, right? So I mean, he got super specific on these kind of sub classifications, but we can keep going.
All right.
Assertiveness, yeah, I think you're fairly assertive.
Yeah.
Okay, the neuroticism is interesting. So 34th percentile is pretty low. So you're just not too. You just don't have that like mental static going on.
When it comes to work and stuff like that, I do. I'm very kind of particular about stuff like that. Just wanting to make sure that I'm on point. And then obviously with this class and stuff like that. But everything else, I don't really stress it too much. I mean, you can only control but so much. So I try not to get too upset when things don't go my way or I can't necessarily plan something out.
Gotcha. Cool. I think we're kind of getting towards the end. So
All right. Let's go down.
And I bet your volatility is which is also very high.
Yeah.
What is that? Individuals and volatility seem to not very, very much. Okay, so you kind of cycle through emotions pretty quickly?
For the most part. Part, I'd probably say, for better or for worse. It depends on who you ask.
Gotcha. So this kind of gets back to your point of, or George's point of, working for a smaller company is going to be very volatile.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you'd actually probably, you're 9th percentile, so you don't cycle through. So you could probably stomach working at a startup where things change rapidly.
Well, yes and no. I think probably at a younger age and stuff like that, I don't have the patience for it anymore. Like I've been in, look, we had a conversation yesterday about bad business models. So I don't, if I can and I don't, look at myself as being the sharpest tool in the shed, but if I can see like there are clear holes in this business, I'm out. Like at a certain point or something like that. Like I've stuck around off the words of who I liked, and who were managing me and just some other things like that. But ultimately, if I don't see the long-term, viability in it, then I'm out.
Yeah, well, it's interesting in that what you said kind of had an assumption packed into it.
Mm-hmm.
Not all startups are bad ideas.
That's true. That's true.
Every single big business was a startup at one point.
That is very true.
But I think that also it's kind of like assimilating. You had a pretty bad experience with a smaller company, right?
Yep, 2 companies.
So I think you going through that probably is why you want to go work for a bigger company that is more stable and it isn't going through, these huge seasons of volatility.
Exactly. Like I want to just, like we talked about, being in a position to kind of control my own destiny. That was why, because like George and yourself, you both own your own businesses and stuff like that. So I think ultimately that would be the goal. I think as far as just learning a business and especially getting into a new space, I feel like I need to learn a little bit more of that as of right now.
George, what do you? So I feel like if you want to start a business working for a smaller business rather than a larger one, because as you get into a larger business, you're going to have a very specific role that's going to interface with other very specific roles. To where if you were an analyst for a smaller company, you might be the entire analytics department. So you're going to learn. You're going to talk to the CFO. You're going to talk to the CEO. You're going to talk to the COO. So you're going to get kind of a wider scope, which I think is the upside of having that. Like, George, what'd you say? Duct taping the analytics stuff together.
Yeah.
The upside of that is that you get to see the whole breadth of the business. To where if you were to work like Jennifer from Wells Fargo, and she said in her department, so they probably do one very, very specific thing. So she doesn't see. And Naveed talked about this a little bit, right? When we hung out a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has like a very specific team that has objectives, to where you're going to be much more of a generalist if you work for a smaller business.
Right. That makes sense. That does make a lot of
George,
sense.
do you agree to that?
Yeah, which could be a good or bad thing, I suppose. If you're in a big organization and you end up learning some really specific tool and it's very marketable, right? And you can become the specialist in that tool, then maybe it's not a bad thing. You could end up at a small organization where you end up doing so many different things and they're so disorderly that you really never get to dig your claws into anything too much that is marketable. On the other hand, you may get to learn a little bit more about how to manage that kind of volatility, or it might be bad. I mean, so there's so many pros and cons to all of them. Individual results may vary going back to that point, but in either of those roles, you may have a point where you are working more, and some data analysts do more so than others, have more kind of client engagement, right? Whether that's inside or outside the organization. That would be another thing to consider that could be related to extroversion, also be related to neuroticism and things like that. So just another, in addition to size, it's kind of that question of, well, who's your audience going to be too?
Right. See, I tried to work for a $12 billion company. I interned there during my MBA program. And that's where I had my existential crisis right there. I mean, like seriously, like waking up or going to bed every Sunday night, I just had this pit in my stomach of like, what if the next 30 years of my life is this, where I go to this job and it's boring and it's this gray office and all the people are not my people, to where I learned pretty quickly interning for 2 semesters at like a major or a major company that it's not a good fit for me. Because I think I thrive on that volatility, or like the changing of the small businesses. To where, although I mean, yeah, and I do feel what you're saying though, of like getting a little bit older and being like, man, I don't want to go through that again.
Yeah. I mean, but realistically, as I said, like it's happening in big companies and smaller companies as far as being able to see the holes, like significant holes. So it happens.
Gotcha. Liam, you've been a little bit quiet. You got any questions, thoughts, concerns?
No, I haven't really worked at any small. Well, I worked at one small company, but I was like a pharmacy tech. That was my mom's company. But other than that, I've worked for the government. So I know I don't want to work in criminal justice anymore. I know that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I know that. So
yeah, George. So Liam is a probation officer.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, having lots of fun there.
Yeah, I do not recommend. I deal with people all the time, but I don't really want to. And I have to talk to them in an authoritative way, so it's not really the best.
Man, you're so like low key and smiley or in class. It's so interesting. It'd be so interesting to see you like chew somebody out.
Well, luckily through this COVID stuff, I just have to I get to wear a mask. So when I talk to them, they can't see my face. They can just see my eyes, and I just make stern eyes at them, and then they take me seriously.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that we've kind of beat this to death. And I basically, what I wanted to do in this live stream was just use the big 5 to have these broader conversations about like the different sizes of companies, the different lanes. So financial analysts versus supply chain. And George, you've been great. And I knew you would be. Like you got your opinions, and they're thoughtful.
Thank you. I'll have to take this test.
Yeah, well, I would be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see your results. Because what's interesting is like if you're like right down the middle, I don't know how helpful it is, but I'm like way on one side, so it's like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And then just like thinking through. You know, because like if I had to be like a data scientist where I just coded alone, I'd lose my mind. I'm just like I couldn't do that. But cool. Well, I think we're gonna call it a night. It's 9:30 here, so I'm getting a little bit tired. But George, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Yeah, best of luck with the apprenticeship and everything. So let me know if I can help, and yeah, enjoy the semester.
Sarah's asking, so just look up George Mount on LinkedIn.
All right.
Yes.
All right, see you guys.
All right,
Thank
see
Thank
ya.
you.